Say hello to the sharks, my daughter-in-law whispered as she gave me a subtle push toward the edge of the yacht. My son, Ethan Carter, stood there, watching, with a smile that chilled me more than the ocean air. Their plan was simple: get rid of me and take my $3 billion fortune. Hours earlier, it had all seemed so different. Ethan had called me himself, not through his assistant, which should have been my first warning. He spoke with warmth I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, let's celebrate your recovery," he'd said. "Just the three of us, like a real family." After weeks of healing from hip surgery and years of feeling distant since my husband William's death, I wanted so badly to believe him. That morning, I had carefully chosen a navy blue dress, the one William always loved on me. Taking a taxi to the marina, I told myself maybe Ethan and his wife, Sophia, still wanted me in their lives. But the moment I saw Sophia's sharp smile waiting on the deck, I should have known. The yacht itself was a gleaming masterpiece of luxury, 40 feet of polished white steel. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Ethan said, gesturing proudly. "We're taking her to the Caribbean next month." He didn't mention, of course, that the yacht had been paid for with the $3 million I had given him last year for his so-called consulting firm. Money that had clearly never touched an investment account. At first, the cruise was pleasant enough. The coastline faded, Sophia served mimosas, and they made small talk about renovating the house, the same house I had signed over to them after William's passing. But soon, the real reason for the outing revealed itself. Ethan's questions grew sharper, more deliberate. "Mom, have you thought about updating your will? Probate can be such a nightmare," he said, pouring me champagne with a little too much enthusiasm. Sophia wasn't even hiding her phone anymore, pretending to take selfies while recording me drinking me, talking about money. They were staging evidence. The pieces fit together in an instant. The papers they'd brought me in the hospital under the guise of temporary power of attorney, my financial advisor suddenly unreachable. The subtle gaslighting about my health. "Ethan," I said carefully, setting down my glass, "I'd like to return to shore." That was when the mask slipped. His eyes hardened, his voice turned sharp. "That's not going to happen, Mom. We need to talk about your memory issues." "Memory issues?" I snapped. "I'm sharper than both of you combined." Sophia stepped closer, her tone cold and rehearsed. "We have it documented. The doctors agree you're no longer capable of handling your finances. It was a trap. Every smile, every word of concern over the last year, all of it had been leading to this moment." Ethan pulled out a folder, holding it like a prize. "Your signature here, transferring the assets for your own protection, and everyone goes home happy." I stared at the papers, then at my son, the child I had raised, the man I had trusted. My heart ached, but my mind was clear. "Go to hell," I said. Sophia's smile widened, predatory and certain. She stepped behind me and whispered her cruel words about sharks. Then came the push, not violent but calculated. Off balance, I stumbled and fell backward into the Atlantic dot. As icy water swallowed me, I heard Ethan's voice, feigning panic. "Mom." "Oh my God, Mom." And over that, Sophia's colder voice, low into her phone. "Yes, file the emergency petition first. Thing Monday morning." She's clearly incompetent too. The waves dragged me under. My navy blue dress wrapped around my legs like a trap. They were gone. My son and his wife had left me to die, but they didn't know me well enough. The Atlantic swallowed me whole, its icy grip clawing at my lungs. My navy dress dragged me down, heavy and merciless, and the cold shocked every nerve in my body. I fought my way upward, kicking free of my shoes, desperate for air. When I broke the surface, gasping, I saw the white streak of the yacht's wake disappearing into the horizon. Ethan and Sophia were gone. They had left me to drown, but fate, or perhaps William's spirit, had other plans. Through blurred eyes, I spotted a small fishing boat cutting across the waves. Its paint was chipped, its engine coughing against the surf, but it was my salvation. Two figures leaned over the railing, shouting. Strong arms dragged me aboard, and I collapsed against the wooden deck, coughing up seawater. Holy hell, lady, what happened to you? The voice belonged to Jack Morrison, a weathered man in his 60s, skin burned bronze by years at sea. Beside him stood his grandson, Noah, barely 16, eyes wide with shock as he handed Jack a thick wool blanket, shivering violently. Teeth chattering too hard to speak, I let Jack wrap me in warmth that smelled of salt and oil. My family, I whispered through trembling lips. The yacht, they left me. Jack's expression darkened. We saw them speeding away, didn't even look back. He shook his head in disgust. What kind of people do that? The kind who inherit $3 billion if I'm not around to stop them, I thought bitterly. Out loud, I forced my voice steady. The kind who aren't family at all. Noah fired up the engine, and Jack grabbed the radio. This is the Molly Sue. We pulled a woman from the water about 12 miles southeast of Gloucester. She's conscious but needs medical attention. Panic flared in me. Wait, my hand shot out, clutching his arm. Please don't let them know you found me. Not yet. Jack steadied me with sharp, ocean-hardened eyes. He had seen storms, shipwrecks, and desperation before. And he saw something in me now, someone running from more than just the sea. In trouble, ma'am? He asked carefully. Yes, I breathed. But not the kind you think. If people find out I survived, I'll never get the chance to set things right. I need to reach land quietly, without anyone knowing I'm alive. Can you help me? Jack hesitated only a moment before lowering the radio. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look like following the rules, he said slowly. All right, we'll get you to shore, no questions asked. They guided the boat into a hidden cove, docking at a small private pier. There Jack introduced Emmy to Mrs. May Chun, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s who ran a modest bed and breakfast on the edge of town. She didn't blink at my bedraggled state or the urgency in Jack's voice. Cash only. No names, no questions, she said briskly, setting a steaming bowl of soup on the table before me. I've seen people running from all sorts of devils. Long as you're not bringing violence to my door, you can stay. That night, while Ethan and Sophia were filing their police report and pretending to be grieving children, I sat in Mrs. Chun's kitchen, hair still damp, body wrapped in borrowed clothes. My mind was cold, clear, sharper than it had been in years. They thought I was dead. They thought they had won, but they had underestimated me. For now, I whispered to myself, staring into the dark window as if it were a mirror. They can believe their plan worked, and then I'll destroy them. Jack leaned against the doorway, hearing those last words. For the first time since he pulled me from the ocean, he allowed himself a grin. Now that, he said, sounds like a plan worth helping with. 4 days after the yacht, the world believed I was dead. The newspapers called it a tragic boating accident. The obituary described me as a beloved widow with fading memory, painting a picture of a woman slipping into dementia. Ethan and Sophia were quoted as the grieving family, their words dripping with false sorrow. They even requested donations to the Alzheimer's Association in my name. I read it all from Mrs. Chun's kitchen, fists clenched tight enough to make my knuckles ache. They weren't just burying me, they were rewriting me, erasing who I truly was and replacing it with their version of a weak, confused old woman. The funeral was scheduled for that Sunday. I went, hidden behind a weather-stained maintenance shed. At the cemetery, binoculars pressed to my eyes, I watched as mourners filled the rows of chairs. Jack crouched beside me, whispering in his low, gravelly voice. Quite a crowd for a woman, they say, was losing her mind. He wasn't wrong. My book club friends were there, my old neighbors, even Dr. Peterson, the surgeon who had replaced my hip. They cried openly. Real grief, real love. And Ethan and Sophia stood at the graveside, perfectly dressed in black, accepting sympathy with faces that could win awards. But not everyone was there. My lawyer, Patricia Walsh, absent. My accountant, Michael Torres, absent. My financial advisor, Richard Barnes, absent. The very people who should have been handling my estate weren't anywhere near my funeral. Jack nudged me. Strange, don't you think? The folks who deal with money missing from the service. My stomach tightened. Yes, strange indeed. After the funeral, I watched from the shadows as Ethan and Sophia worked the crowd like politicians, smiling, shaking hands, but carefully steering conversations away when anyone asked about my final days. They were in control, or so they thought. That night, Jack drove me to my old home in Beacon Hill, the house I had shared with William for 35 years. The one I had signed over to Ethan because I foolishly believed family still meant loyalty. Street was quiet, midnight. I still had my old key. Ethan had never thought to take it back. Moving like a trespasser in my own home, I slipped inside. It was strange, too strange. Sheets covered old furniture, but new, expensive pieces had been added. A leather sofa, a gleaming entertainment system, a fridge stocked with fine imported foods. Someone had been living here regularly, but it was in the study, William's old study, where the truth finally surfaced. On the desk lay stacks of papers, financial statements, legal drafts, and, most chilling, a detailed project timeline labeled The Eleanor Project. My name, my death, turned into a plan. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page. Fake medical reports of my supposed confusion. Stage photographs like the one at Ethan's birthday party where I'd looked bewildered. They had documented every misstep, every forgetful moment, and twisted it into evidence of dementia. And then I saw it, a letter signed only with the initials MT, whoever this person was. They were orchestrating everything, urging Ethan and Sophia to accelerate the timeline because I had started asking too many questions. Phase 3, it read, was my death. I photographed every page with a disposable camera Jack had given me. My fury grew with each click. My own son had been planning my destruction for more than a year. The sound of a car door slammed outside. Headlights swept the windows. My heart stopped. Ethan and Sophia were back. I froze, clutching the papers, listening as their voices drifted into the house. Do you think that Peterson woman bought it? Sophia's tone was casual, confident. She cried too hard to think straight. Ethan replied, Mom fell off a boat. It happens. Probate opens Monday. MT says we'll have full access to the accounts in 6 weeks. I slipped out the back door, heart hammering, slipping into the garden I had planted with my own hands decades ago. And then the sound pierced the night, a baby's cry. I froze, crouched among the rose bush, staring at the glowing windows of the house. A baby's cry. Ethan and Sophia had never said anything about having a child. And Sophia, just days ago on the yacht, had shown no signs of recent childbirth. There was a baby in my home. A baby they had hidden. Jack picked me up on the corner 15 minutes later, his truck rumbling softly in the night. He took one look at my pale face. You look like you've seen a ghost, he muttered. Worse, I whispered. My voice shook. I've seen my replacement. The baby's cry haunted me long after Jack's truck pulled away from the curb. A sound so small, yet powerful enough to shake my entire world. Ethan and Sophia had never planned on children, at least. That's what they'd always claimed. They were too ambitious, too focused on their careers. But now there was an infant in that house. And with the documents I had just photographed, it was clear this baby was part of their plan. The next morning, I developed the photos at a small 1-hour shop Jack trusted. When I laid them out across the table in Mrs. Chun's kitchen, my hands trembled. Evidence of a year-long conspiracy, fake medical records, staged photos, notes about my declining health, and projections for how they'd spend my fortune. And then, tucked under a stack, a birth certificate, baby Carter, born 3 weeks ago. Parents, Ethan Carter and Sophia Carter. My pulse quickened. I had been on that yacht with Sophia just days ago. She wasn't recovering from childbirth. The certificate was a lie, which meant that baby wasn't hers. Whose child is he? I whispered. Mrs. Chun listened silently as I laid everything out. Her sharp eyes softened once when I mentioned the infant's cry. This isn't just about money anymore, she said firmly. You need someone who can follow them, someone professional. She called in a favor. By noon, I was sitting in a cramped office above a sandwich shop, staring across the desk at Daniel Crawford. 50 years old, prematurely gray hair, eyes like a hawk. He didn't waste words. So let me get this straight, he said after hearing my story. Your son and his wife tried to kill you, faked your death, bought a baby, and are working with someone named MT to steal your fortune. You want me to follow them, dig into this baby, and identify their co-conspirator? That's right. Daniel leaned back, studying me. And you're paying me how? According to the papers, you're dead and broke. I slid an envelope across the desk. Emergency cash William and I always kept in a safety deposit box, enough to cover you. He flipped through it, nodded. Then I'll take the case. But if what you're saying is true, we're dealing with something much bigger than a greedy couple. We're dealing with organized crime. The following day, Daniel delivered his first report. Your son's been busy since you died. Meetings with lawyers, trips to the bank. But here's the kicker. He and Sophia visited Whitmore Reproductive Services 3 times. Very private, very expensive, specializes in surrogacy. My stomach twisted. Surrogacy, of course. They bought a baby, Daniel said grimly. Not just any baby one arranged to look like their own. Paid in cash. Papers forged in advance. Mrs. Chun placed a cup of tea in front of me, her hand steady while mine shook. So the mother? I asked. Daniel's face darkened. Her name was Sarah Collins, 17 years old. No family, no support. Miranda Torres found her in a shelter in Maine, promised her $50,000 to carry a child for a loving couple. She died during delivery. No, I whispered. The word clawed its way out of me. That girl, she didn't just die. They killed her. Daniel nodded slowly. That's what I believe. The nurse at Whitmore said Sarah was perfectly healthy until the last minutes. Then she collapsed. The doctor of record, Miranda Torres. TTHE mastermind behind it all. Daniel spread photos across the table. A polished woman in her 40s. Auburn hair, expensive suits, shaking Ethan's hand outside a law office. She calls it family transition planning, he explained. She finds wealthy elderly people, orchestrates evidence of dementia, convinces families to take over their estates. When the victims resist, accidents happen. How many? I asked, my voice hoarse. At least 6 that I can prove. Likely dozens more. The room spun around me. My son wasn't just a betrayer. He had tied himself to a network that preyed on the elderly, murdered young mothers, and trafficked babies. I closed my eyes, forcing steel back into my veins. They think they won. They think I'm gone. I opened my eyes, meeting Daniel's steady gaze. Let's make them regret ever underestimating me. Mrs. Chun smiled faintly, her needles clacking against yarn as she resumed her knitting. Good, she said. Because if you want war, I have a feeling Miranda Torres just handed you a perfect battlefield. For days, I studied the photographs, the documents, and the notes Daniel had collected. Each detail was another nail in the coffin Ethan and Sophia had built for themselves. But the more I pieced together, the more I realized that secrecy was no longer enough. If I stayed hidden, they would only keep moving forward. No. It was time they knew their victim wasn't resting peacefully in the grave they dug. They need to believe in ghosts. I told Daniel and Jack as we sat around Mrs. Chun's kitchen table, not just that I'm alive, but that I see through every one of their lies. Double quotes. Mrs. Chun's eyes twinkled. Psychological warfare, I like it. Daniel leaned forward. But if you make yourself known, they'll panic. They'll fight back. Good, I said. Panic makes people sloppy. The first step was finding an ally inside the house, the one person who wasn't corrupted by greed. That person was the nurse. Her name was Carolyn Peterson, 35 years old, a single mother working shifts to keep her little boy in school. Daniel had already run her background clean, responsible, honest. She was caring for the baby during the day, completely unaware of the dark truth behind his existence. So, one morning, I went to my former home and rang the doorbell. Caroline opened it, holding a baby bottle, dressed in cartoon print scrubs. Her face froze. Recognition spread across her features. She had seen my name and face in the papers, the obituary, the news reports. She stammered, eyes wide. You're supposed to be dead. Stories in the news aren't always true, I said gently. May I come in? We need to talk. She hesitated, but something in my eyes, or perhaps in the way the infant gurgled behind her, made her step aside. I walked into my own living room, the space Ethan and Sophia had defiled with their expensive furniture and stolen life. And then I saw him, the baby. Dark hair, wide brown eyes, perfect little hands curled around the blanket. He stared at me with a seriousness that didn't belong to a newborn. Oh, I breathed, bending down. You beautiful little thing. Caroline's voice was soft, almost apologetic. They said his name would be Robert Jr. after his grandfather, but they haven't really decided. I nodded, because they don't know him, because he isn't theirs. Caroline's eyes flickered with confusion. What do you mean? I pulled the photos and documents from my bag, the forged birth certificate, the timeline, the files on Sarah Collins. I laid them out on the table while Caroline's hands trembled. I told her everything, the illegal surrogacy, the teenage girl who had died in childbirth, the fortune Ethan and Sophia were willing to kill for Dot. By the time I finished, Carolyn was crying. She looked at the baby as though seeing him for the first time. He's an orphan, she whispered. Yes, I said softly. And if they succeed, he'll grow up believing lies. But we can make sure he knows the truth, that his real mother, Sarah Collins, gave him life at the cost of her own. Caroline wiped her tears, resolve hardening in her face. What do you need me to do? Document everything. How they treat him, what they tell you, who comes and goes. Keep notes, take pictures if you can. You'll be his guardian until I can protect him legally. His real name should honor the truth. Robert Sarah Carter. Robert for his grandfather. Sarah for his birth mother. Caroline's eyes shone with determination. Robert Sarah, she repeated, holding the baby close. Yes, that's who he is. With Caroline on my side, the plan moved to phase 2, while Ethan and Sophia met downtown with Miranda Torres. To finalize probate paperwork, Daniel made sure a message was delivered to their lawyer's office on elegant stationery. In handwriting Ethan would recognize instantly. The note was short and devastating. Dear Ethan and Sophia, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk, love. Motherps. Give my regards to little Robert Sarah. He's beautiful. Delivery arrived at exactly 11:47 a.m. Daniel watched from across the street as Ethan, Sophia, and Torres stormed out of the law office, their faces pale with panic. For the first time, they felt the chill of fear. That afternoon, when they returned to the house, expecting safety, expecting control, they opened the door to find me. I was seated in William's old armchair, perfectly at ease, my hands folded, my eyes waiting. "Hello, darlings," I said smoothly. "How was your meeting? I hope you didn't sign anything important while I was away." Sophia screamed. Ethan froze in the doorway, keys still dangling in his hand, staring as though I might vanish if he blinked too hard. The haunting had begun. The silence in the living room stretched, heavy and suffocating. Sophia's scream had cut through the air like glass shattering. But now there was only stillness, her wide eyes locked on me. Ethan frozen in the doorway, pale as chalk, surprised. I asked, my voice calm, steady, almost pleasant. I must say, reading my own obituary was an interesting experience. Alzheimer's donations, that was a nice touch. Carolyn stepped in quietly from the kitchen, cradling baby Robert Sarah in her arms. She stood close, her presence deliberate, ready to bear witness to what came next. Sophia pointed a trembling finger at me. You drowned. We saw you go under." "Yes," I interrupted, "and yet here I am." Turns out drowning is harder than you thought, especially when good people are there to pull you from the water. Ethan finally found his voice, though it cracked with strain. "Mom, the Coast Guard searched. They said they searched for debris." I snapped, my eyes hard. "Not survivors." "Because no one ever reported me missing, did they? You made sure of that?" I rose slowly from William's old armchair and took the baby from Caroline's arms, holding him gently against me. He gazed up with those wide brown eyes, innocent, unaware of the war raging around him. "Tell me, Sophia," I said softly, though venom laced my words, "what exactly did you give birth? Because 4 days ago on that yacht, you looked quite comfortable in your designer swimsuit. Not like a woman who delivered a child 3 weeks earlier." Sophia's lips parted, but no words came. Ethan shifted uneasily, guilt written in every line of his face. "Don't bother," I said. "I know the truth. His mother's name was Sarah Collins. 17 years old, from Maine. She had no family, no support. Miranda Torres found her, promised her money, and delivered her into your hands. She died during childbirth under very suspicious circumstances." Carolyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The name was new to her, but the truth sank in instantly. "That's not true." Ethan muttered weakly, though his voice carried no conviction. I set the baby back in Caroline's arms and stepped toward them, my fury controlled but sharp. "Really? Not true? Because I have Sarah's death certificate? I have documents, financial transfers, timelines of your so-called Eleanor project, and I have something else." I reached under the cushion of the chair and pulled out a small digital recorder. I held it up where they both could see. "Every word you've said since walking through that door has been recorded. And in Massachusetts, only one party needs to consent." Sophia's composure cracked. Rage replaced fear. "You can't use that in court." "It's entrapment or something. It's evidence." I cut her off, my voice like steel. "Evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Evidence that ties you directly to Miranda Torres and her operation." They sat, cornered, faces pale, the weight of my words pressing down on them. "What do you want?" Ethan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do I want?" I laughed, low and bitter. "I want my money back. I want this baby protected and raised, knowing the truth about his mother. I want Miranda Torres rotting in prison for every life she's destroyed. And I want the two of you to live the rest of your lives remembering you tried to kill your own mother." Sophia leaned forward, eyes narrowed, venom dripping from her. Voice, prove it. You can accuse us all you want, but without proof you have nothing. I smiled coldly and dropped the folder of photos and documents onto the coffee table images of Ethan and Sophia meeting Torres. Visiting Whitmore Reproductive Services, forged legal drafts, fake medical reports, timelines of my supposed decline. Darling, I said softly, I have more proof than you can possibly imagine. For the first time since I'd walked into that room, Ethan looked truly afraid, but instead of surrender, they made the worst mistake of all. They doubled down. That night, Daniel called me at Mrs. Chun's bed and breakfast. His voice was sharp, urgent. They're moving fast, he said. I intercepted their calls. They've been on the phone all night with Miranda Torres and someone else. They kept referring to him as the cleaner. My blood ran cold. What kind of cleaner? I asked. The kind who makes problems disappear permanently, Daniel replied grimly. They're planning to kill you again. And this time, they want the body found. No more missing at sea. They're making sure there's no coming back. But news from Daniel left no room for hesitation. Ethan and Sophia had chosen escalation. They weren't going to stop until I was silenced and Miranda. Torres was on her way to make sure of it. Mrs. Chen was the first to speak after Daniel's warning. If they've hired a cleaner, you don't have much time. You can't stay. Here, within an hour, Jack had us packed into his old pickup, heading for a small cottage on a private island that only fishermen used. Isolated, quiet, no curious eyes. A temporary safe house. I should have felt safe. But I didn't, because I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. Torres didn't just want me gone, she wanted the baby gone too. An orphaned infant with no legal guardians was too much of a liability for her scheme. She'd kill him. I whispered, my stomach twisting. She'd make it look like an accident, a gas leak, a fire, something tidy, something final. Jack glanced at me from the driver's seat. Then we don't let her. Daniel arrived an hour later with news that made everything crystal clear. Torres wasn't just a lawyer helping greedy families. She was the head of a networked and organized ring targeting wealthy seniors across New England. At least 20 suspicious deaths, all ruled accidents or natural causes. Doctors, judges, even police officers were in her pocket. You're the first one who ever survived, Daniel told me. That's why she's coming herself. You're the only witness who can connect her to all of this. The words chilled me. But they also gave me clarity. If I wanted to protect Robert Sarah, if I wanted to end this operation, there was only one way. We stop her, I said firmly. On my terms, Daniel hesitated. You're suggesting a trap. Yes, I replied. She thinks I'll walk into my old house to negotiate. Fine, let her think that. Let her believe I'm trading my life for the baby. But what she doesn't know is that the FBI will already be inside, recording every word. Mrs. Chun frowned. This is reckless. You'll be sitting in a room with a woman who's orchestrated dozens of murders. I met her gaze, and that's exactly why she talked. Because she won't be able to resist showing me how clever she is. I just need her to confess while the recorders are rolling. The plan was set. Carolyn hid baby Robert Sarah in the basement of the old house, ready to flee through a servant's entrance if things went wrong. Daniel coordinated with federal agents he once worked with, men and women who had been hunting Torres for years, but never had the evidence to tie her directly to a crime. This time she would incriminate herself. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I walked up the front steps of the house I once called home. Ethan opened the door. His face was drawn, weary, almost frightened. For a fleeting second, I saw the little boy I had raised, the child who used to run into my arms after school. But that boy was long gone. Mom, he said softly. Hello, Ethan, I replied. I'm here as promised. Sophia paced inside the living room, her nerves unraveling, her mask slipping. "She be here soon," she muttered. "Miranda wants to talk to you herself." And then she arrived. Miranda Torres walked in at exactly 7 o'clock. She was smaller than I'd expected, composed, dressed in a tailored suit, her auburn hair neat. She looked more like an accountant than a murderer. "Mrs. Carter," she said warmly, extending her hand as though we were old friends. "At a charity gala. I'm glad you survived your unfortunate boating accident. We have much to discuss." She sat across from me, opened her leather portfolio, and began as though we were negotiating a contract. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble for my clients," she said smoothly. "They followed my instructions perfectly, and yet here. You are alive, well, and unfortunately informed about matters that don't concern you." "Murder concerns me," I replied evenly, "especially when it's mine." She smiled coldly. "I prefer to think of it as accelerated estate planning. Families deserve to access their inheritance without years of legal entanglements. We provide a valuable service." "And the elderly you kill?" I asked, my voice sharp. "What service do you provide them?" "Peace," she said simply. "An end to confusion, to decline, to fear. A dignified exit that spares their families the pain of watching them waste away." Her words made me sick. But I stayed calm, steady, baiting her further. "How many people?" She didn't hesitate. She glanced at her notes as if reading off. "An accounting sheet, 37. The number struck the air like a thunderclap. 37 lives confessed without shame. "And I suppose you plan to make me number 38? I asked. She smiled again. "No, Mrs. Carter, you'll be number 39. We had to resolve another case earlier today." That was when I smiled. For the first time since she entered, I let myself enjoy the moment. "Miranda Torres," I said softly, "you're under arrest." The walls exploded with movement. FBI agents burst through every door, their voices thundering commands. "Hands where we can see them." Torres bolted for the back door, but she didn't make it 3 steps before 3 agents tackled her to the floor. Ethan and Sophia sat frozen on the couch, pale and silent as the agents snapped cuffs around their wrists. One of the agents, a woman with a sharp gaze, turned to me and nodded. "Mrs. Carter, that was dangerous, but very well done." For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. The nightmare was over. The trial dragged on for months, but the outcome was never in doubt. Miranda Torres, once a polished lawyer with powerful friends, was convicted on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, elder abuse, and racketeering. She received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her network collapsed in pieces around her. 17 other conspirators were arrested: doctors who falsified records, probate judges who looked the other way, family members who traded blood for money. Over $200 million stolen from the elderly was traced, documented, and reclaimed. Torres's empire of greed and death was dismantled forever. Ethan and Sophia didn't escape justice either. Both faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder in the death of Sarah Collins. The evidence against them was overwhelming: the documents, the recordings, their own words. They pleaded guilty in exchange for lighter sentences. Ethan received 25 years. Sophia received 20. They wrote letters to me from prison. Ethan's words were full of excuses, apologies, pleas for forgiveness. He blamed Miranda, claimed he was manipulated, begged me to understand, but I never wrote back. Forgiveness was not mine to give. Not when Sarah Collins was buried before she ever had a chance at life. The real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the family court months later when I stood before a judge with baby Robert Sarah in my arms. His mother was Sarah Collins. I told the court, my voice steady. 17 years old, brave, loving. She wanted this child to have a better life, and she paid for that dream with her own. His name will honor her sacrifice, Robert Sarah Carter. Robert for his grandfather, Sarah for his mother, and Carter because he will be raised in truth, not lies. The judge, a woman in her 60s who had followed every headline of the case, smiled softly as she stamped the adoption papers. "I think Sarah Collins would be proud," she said. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. "I am 72 now, and Robert Sarah is a bright, curious little boy who asks 1,000 questions a day. He knows exactly who he is. He knows his birth mother was a courageous young woman named Sarah who gave him life. He knows that his adoptive father and stepmother tried to use him in a scheme of greed, and that they paid the price. He knows that real family isn't always the one you're born into. It's the one you fight for around us. Life has settled into a rhythm of love and safety. Mrs. Chun still runs her bed and breakfast, though now she also helps elderly people who fear their families may not have their best interests at heart. Jack still runs fishing charters, his legend growing as the man who once pulled a drowning woman from the Atlantic. Daniel still works for the FBI, though every Christmas he sends me a card with photos of other lives saved, reminders that my story helped end Torres's operation for good daughters for me. I no longer measure family by blood. Blood betrayed me. Family, I've learned, is about presence. It's about showing up when someone needs you, protecting the vulnerable, choosing love over greed. When I tuck Robert Sarah into bed at night, I look at his little face and see a future Sarah Collins never had the chance to see. And I promise her silently every single night that her son will never know the kind of betrayal I endured, because in this family, the one I built, the one forged in fire and survival, no one gets pushed off yachts, no one fakes wills, and no one dies for someone else to get rich. This is a better family. The only one that matters.